Welcome back to Valencia Tales, wishing you a good day filled with calm and gentle moments. And now let's step together into today's story. I went to a party with my husband. He left with another woman because she's rich. He tossed his car keys at me and laughed, "Find your own way home." The next morning, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. His mistress was crying, and he stood frozen at the door, realizing something he never expected. For 15 years, I told myself that marriage requires compromise, that not every slight deserves confrontation, that maintaining peace is more important than defending pride. I told myself these things while my husband gradually erased me from his professional life, introduced me as someone who does bookkeeping instead of someone who runs a successful consulting practice, and spent our children's college fund on hotel rooms with a woman whose family owned half of Connecticut. I am Katherine Brennan, 42 years old, and I am very good at lying to myself when the truth is too uncomfortable to face. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of dignity reclaimed and justice served. If you believe that betrayal deserves accountability, please consider subscribing. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. My specialty is financial restructuring for small businesses on the brink of collapse. Companies hire me when their revenue statements do not match their bank balances, when money disappears into gaps they cannot explain, when they suspect someone is stealing but lack proof. I analyze their books with surgical precision, identifying exactly where funds are being diverted and why their financial structure no longer supports their operations. I am excellent at this work because I understand how people hide theft behind legitimate-looking transactions, how they exploit trust to create plausible deniability, how they convince themselves that what they are doing is not really wrong if nobody notices. The irony is almost funny. I can spot financial deception in a corporate ledger within hours, but I missed it in my own marriage for 18 months. My husband Edward sells luxury cars to wealthy clients who view $70,000 vehicles as reasonable purchases. He is charming in that practiced way that makes people believe they are special, that their connection with him is unique, that he genuinely cares about their satisfaction rather than his commission. He has been using these same skills on me for years, and I let him because the alternative was admitting that the life I built was constructed on foundations that were never as solid as I believed. Thursday evening, he walked into my office and told me I needed to attend his dealership's anniversary gala on Saturday. After 3 years of excluding me from his professional world, this sudden requirement should have triggered every alarm system in my body. It did trigger them. I just ignored the warnings because I had become very skilled at pretending everything was fine. 2 days later, I stood in a parking lot at midnight holding car keys my husband had thrown at my chest, watching him drive away with another woman, and I finally stopped lying to myself about what my marriage had become. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up in that parking lot, you need to understand what I was before that moment. You need to see the life I convinced myself was worth protecting, even as it slowly poisoned everything I touched. My home in suburban Connecticut looks like it belongs in a design magazine. White picket fence that Edward insisted on installing 5 years ago because successful people have white picket fences. Hydrangeas that bloom reliably every spring because I researched the correct soil composition and fertilization schedule and followed the instructions with the same precision I applied to balance sheets. Interior walls painted in fashionable neutral tones that Edward selected to impress the colleagues he occasionally brought home for cocktails before he stopped bringing anyone home at all. Everything curated, everything intentional, everything designed to project an image of stability and achievement that had nothing to do with the reality happening inside those carefully painted walls. Our daughter Olivia is 14, brilliant in that quiet way that often gets overlooked in a world that rewards volume over substance. She watches everything with dark eyes that miss nothing. Absorbing information and drawing conclusions, she keeps locked behind a careful mask of teenage indifference. 2 months ago, she asked me why Dad doesn't eat dinner with us anymore. I gave her the standard explanation about his demanding work schedule, about important clients who required evening attention, about how successful people sometimes have to sacrifice family time for professional obligations. She looked at me with an expression that was far too knowing for a 14-year-old and said nothing, which somehow felt worse than if she had challenged my lies directly. Her silence was judgment. Her silence was understanding that I was protecting a fiction neither of us believed anymore. Our son James is 11, still open and affectionate in ways that boys his age are beginning to outgrow under social pressure to appear tough and unbothered. He hugs me when he comes home from school and tells me about his day with enthusiastic detail about lunch trades and playground politics and the chapter book his teacher is reading aloud during quiet time. 3 weeks ago, he asked why Mom and Dad don't laugh together like his friend Mason's parents do. I told him that adults just get quieter as they get older, that it's normal and nothing to worry about, that love changes shape over time but remains steady underneath the surface changes. The words tasted like poison in my mouth even as I spoke them. My parents have been married 47 years and still hold hands when they walk through the grocery store. They still finish each other's sentences and share private jokes and look at each other like they are seeing something precious that nobody else can fully appreciate. I know what a real partnership looks like. I know what enduring affection feels like when it's genuine rather than performed. And I know with absolute certainty that what Edward and I have is not that and has not been that for longer than I want to calculate. But admitting that truth meant acknowledging that I had wasted 15 years building something that was already crumbling beneath me. It meant accepting that I had been so focused on maintaining the appearance of success that I had ignored the structural failures threatening to collapse everything. It meant facing the reality that I had become exactly like the failing businesses I consult for, the ones that keep operating long past the point when any reasonable analysis would recommend closure. The ones that cling to past success while ignoring present disaster. The shift in Edward's behavior happened so gradually that I could convince myself I was imagining the changes. 3 years ago, he stopped inviting me to dealership events. He claimed I made his colleagues uncomfortable with my direct questions about sales practices and commission structures, that the luxury automotive world required a social fluency I simply did not possess, that my tendency toward blunt communication clashed with the subtle dance of high-end sales. I accepted this explanation because it aligned with how I saw myself. I am more comfortable with spreadsheets than cocktail parties. I am more at home analyzing financial statements than navigating small talk about golf handicaps and vacation homes in the Hamptons. But acceptance of his explanation became acceptance of my exclusion, and exclusion became invisibility. Edward began staying late at work multiple nights each week, always with plausible explanations about difficult clients or important deals that required extra attention. He started dressing better, wearing cologne I hadn't purchased for him, checking his phone with increasing frequency and decreasing transparency. Our conversations shrank to logistics about children's schedules and household maintenance, the kind of functional exchanges between roommates rather than partners. I noticed all of this. I documented it mentally the same way I document financial irregularities in client accounts. I saw the pattern emerging, but I chose to interpret it as natural marital evolution rather than systematic erasure because the alternative was too frightening to contemplate. Edward Brennan works at Meridian Luxury Imports, a dealership that caters to Connecticut's wealthiest residents. He sells vehicles that cost more than most families earn in a year. He wears custom suits that probably cost more than the used sedan I drive to client meetings. He speaks fluently in the language of aspiration and exclusivity, convincing clients that the right automobile will elevate not just their transportation, but their entire social standing. I used to find this skill impressive. Now I recognize it as practiced manipulation applied to everyone he encounters, including his own wife. For 15 years, he has been selling me a version of our marriage the same way he sells luxury vehicles, emphasizing the features I want to believe in while carefully concealing the defects that would make me question the value of what I'm getting. And I bought it. For 15 years, I bought every word. Thursday evening, Edward walked into my home office. He stood in the doorway with that carefully neutral expression he uses when he wants something but doesn't want to reveal how much it matters to him. "You need to come to the dealership anniversary gala this Saturday," he said. "Not an invitation, a requirement." I looked up from my spreadsheet. "Why?" I asked. "Why now after 3 years?" "The managing director's wife will be there," he said. "It looks better if we attend as couples. You understand?" I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway because that is what I had learned to do. Accept non-explanations, swallow questions, maintain the fiction. So I agreed to attend the gala. I agreed to put on a dress and smile beside my husband and pretend we were the partnership we had stopped being years ago. I was just grateful that after 3 years of exclusion, I was finally being invited back into his professional world. 2 days later, everything I had been pretending not to see would become impossible to ignore. Saturday evening arrived with perfect autumn weather. Edward spent 40 minutes getting ready, adjusting his tie 3 times. I wore a navy silk dress, elegant in a timeless way. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone professional. When I looked at Edward and his custom suit, I saw someone who belonged to a different world. The drive to Brookfield Country Club took 30 minutes. Edward drove in silence, checking his phone at red lights. The country club itself is a monument to inherited wealth, designed to intimidate anyone not born into it. Mahogany-paneled walls, crystal chandeliers, the air smelling of expensive perfume and old money. I felt immediately out of place. My dress now looked shabby beside the designer gowns surrounding me. Women wore clothing that cost more than my mortgage payments, jewelry that required insurance riders. Edward transformed the moment we walked through the doors. His posture straightened, his smile widened, his voice took on the warm, engaging tone he uses with wealthy clients. He worked the room with practiced efficiency, and I followed slightly behind him like an accessory. Each time, he introduced me the same way. "This is my wife, Katherine. She does bookkeeping for small businesses. Not financial consulting. Bookkeeping." A word that diminished my work, but I said nothing. I accepted a glass of wine and positioned myself near a decorative column, observing. Then she walked in, and everything changed. Vanessa Whitmore didn't simply enter the ballroom. She commanded its attention. She was stunning, her dress clearly custom designed, her jewelry sparkling with genuine stones. But what struck me most was the immediate transformation in Edward. The professional mask fell away, replaced by something raw and unguarded. He looked at Vanessa the way I had always hoped someone would look at me. They gravitated toward each other like magnets. When they met, Vanessa placed her hand on Edward's arm with casual intimacy, and they laughed together with a genuineness I hadn't seen from him in years. I stood by my column and watched my husband fall into conversation with another woman as though I did not exist. Edward eventually remembered me and brought Vanessa over for introductions. "This is Katherine," he said, gesturing toward me, as if pointing out furniture. "Lovely to meet you," Vanessa said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I learned through overheard conversations that Vanessa Whitmore represented generational wealth. Her family owned Whitmore Development Corporation, a real estate empire. She was recently divorced and had developed an interest in luxury vehicles that brought her frequently to Meridian Imports, where Edward served as her personal sales consultant. The phrase echoed in my head. The evening deteriorated from there. Edward and Vanessa disappeared together twice. The first time, he claimed they needed to discuss specifications for her new vehicle on the terrace. They were gone 25 minutes. When they returned, Vanessa's lipstick was slightly smudged and Edward's tie was loosened. The second disappearance happened near the bar. They were gone for 20 minutes. I stood alone, pretending not to notice the pitying glances from other wives or the whispers that stopped when I came near. I considered leaving, calling a car service, but some stubborn part of me refused to slink away. So I stayed. I stood by my column and watched my marriage end in real time. At 11 p.m., Edward approached me with Vanessa at his side. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his car keys, and tossed them at me. They hit my chest before I caught them. "Find your own way home," Edward said, his voice loud enough for several nearby couples to hear. "Vanessa's offering to show me her new estate in Greenwich. Could be important for business, you understand." Vanessa laughed a sound that was crystalline and cruel. "I'm sure you can manage, Katherine. You're very capable with practical matters." They turned and walked away. Edward didn't look back. I stood in the parking lot holding his car keys and watched my husband climb into another woman's custom Range Rover. I felt something fundamental break inside me quietly, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. I drove Edward's car home through empty suburban streets at midnight, my hands shaking. The dashboard lights cast harsh shadows, and I barely recognized the woman in the rearview mirror. She looked harder, older, more dangerous. The rage was there, but underneath it something colder was forming. The part of my brain that solves problems was waking up cataloging what had just happened. My marriage was no longer a relationship to be saved, but a fraud to be investigated. The house was dark and silent. Olivia and James were with my parents, a convenience I now realized Edward had counted on. This wasn't spontaneous, it was planned. He had orchestrated my public humiliation. That realization changed everything. I went to my office, made strong coffee, and did what I do best. I started investigating. Edward and I had joint accounts, a trust I now recognized was a mistake. I started with our joint credit card statements, downloading 3 years of history. The first pattern appeared within 20 minutes: regular charges at the Brookfield Inn every Friday afternoon for the past 8 months. Always $275, a premium suite. That was nearly $9,000 on hotel rooms. Then came the expensive restaurant charges, the jewelry store purchases on dates that were not our anniversaries or my birthdays. Then I found it a $4,000 charge from La Maison Boutique 3 weeks ago. I looked it up. Exclusive women's clothing. I thought of the custom dress Vanessa wore. The rage was almost physical, but I forced myself to stay focused. Next, I pulled up Edward's personal checking account. He kept his credentials on a sticky note in an old planner. He wasn't sophisticated about security. The account revealed monthly transfers of $5,000 to something called VW Holdings, LLC, for the past 7 months. $35,000 total. VW. Vanessa Whitmore. I dived into corporate registrations. VW Holdings, LLC was registered as a business consulting firm, with Vanessa Whitmore as the principal officer. The business purpose was providing strategic advisory services to automotive sales professionals. It was a perfect cover story designed to disguise payments for an affair. Vanessa had monetized her relationship with Edward. I pulled our savings account statements next. The account I had been steadily building for our children's education had been systematically drained. Edward had been making large withdrawals, and the dates matched the transfers to VW Holdings. He had stolen our children's college fund to pay his mistress. The discovery that made my blood run cold came from our filing cabinet. I found a second set of mortgage documents. I'd never seen a home equity line of credit for $250,000 taken out 6 months ago. Spousal consent is required. I looked at the signature page and saw my name, but the handwriting wasn't quite right. The forgery was obvious once I knew to look. Edward had forged my signature. That wasn't just betrayal, it was criminal fraud. I stared at the documents spread across my desk. Bank statements, credit card records, corporate filings, mortgage papers. They told a story of systematic financial betrayal spanning at least 18 months. He had transferred approximately $180,000 to his mistress and her shell company. The sky was lightening. I had been awake all night, but I had what I needed: a complete financial picture of his betrayal. Evidence that would stand up in court. Edward had told me to find my own way home. He had made a catastrophic miscalculation. I had found my way home, and now I was going to systematically dismantle everything he thought he had built. At 7 a.m., my phone rang. It was Edward. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Katherine, I need you to transfer $50,000 from your business account to my personal checking today," he said without preamble. "It's urgent." The audacity was staggering. He continued, "Business opportunity that can't wait." After everything, he was demanding more money from the business I had built. "What business opportunity?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Vanessa's offering to invest in a luxury vehicle leasing venture. I'm starting," he said, excitement in his voice. "But I need capital to demonstrate commitment. She's putting in $500,000. I need to match 10%. He was still being scammed. This was the final extraction. "I'll need to review the business plan and partnership documents," I said professionally. "There's no time for your analysis, Katherine," he snapped. "This is opportunity knocking. Either you're with me or you're in my way." "I see," I said quietly. "I'll make my decision soon." I hung up and immediately called David Martinez, a lawyer specializing in marital fraud, whose practice I had saved 2 years earlier. He answered on the 3rd ring. "David, this is Katherine Brennan. I need help." I spent 20 minutes walking him through my discoveries. "Katherine," he said when I finished, his voice sharp with focus, Your husband just handed you a nuclear weapon. Let me make some calls." 3 hours later, David called back. "I've got someone you need to meet. Andrea Thornhill. She's a forensic accountant, the best in Connecticut. She's agreed to look at your case. Can you meet at your house in an hour?" Andrea Thornhill arrived at noon, sharp and professional. She and David sat at my kitchen table as I laid out my documentation. Andrea worked in silence for nearly an hour. Finally, she looked up, her expression a mixture of professional interest and genuine outrage. "This is one of the most comprehensive patterns of marital financial fraud I've encountered in 15 years, she said. "Your husband has systematically depleted marital assets, committed forgery, and transferred substantial sums to a shell company. Together, they represent potential criminal fraud." She tapped a printout of the VW Holdings registration. "But there's something else here. I've seen this exact pattern before, twice. Different victims, but the same company name, Vanessa Whitmore." "Yes," I said. "I think your husband's mistress is running a serial con operation targeting married men," Andrea continued. She began searching on her iPad. "Here, VW Holdings has received payments from at least 3 other individuals, all of them connected to Meridian Luxury Imports." She looked at me. "Your husband isn't special to her. He's one of several marks. She targets middle-aged men and high-commission salesmen susceptible to flattery. She initiates affairs, introduces fake investment opportunities, and extracts maximum value." She turned her iPad to show me the tax filings for VW Holdings. "But here's her critical mistake. VW Holdings has been generating substantial revenue without filing appropriate tax returns. That's tax evasion. Based on what I can see, Vanessa Whitmore owes approximately $250,000 in back taxes, not including penalties." David leaned forward. "Can we use this?" "Absolutely," Andrea said. "We file for divorce with comprehensive financial exhibits, but we also file a civil fraud lawsuit against Vanessa Whitmore and VW Holdings, naming Edward as a co-plaintiff to argue he was a victim. And we forward all documentation to the IRS. We can potentially recover a substantial portion of the money, and we can ensure Vanessa Whitmore faces consequences." "How long will this take?" I asked. "I'll have my report to David by Sunday evening," Andrea said. "He can file everything Monday morning." David met my eyes. "Once we set this in motion, there's no going back. This will get ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "They made it ugly when they threw car keys at me in a parking lot. I'm just documenting the ugliness they created." Monday morning, David filed the paperwork. Divorce petition, civil fraud lawsuit, and a package to the IRS. I spent the day waiting for the inevitable fallout. Tuesday morning, Edward called at 6 a.m., his voice high with panic. "Katherine, Vanessa's attorney, contacted me. She's threatening to sue me for defamation. She's terminating our consulting agreement. I need those documents showing the payments were legitimate business expenses." "There are no documents showing that Edward," I said calmly, "because it wasn't a legitimate business relationship. She was scamming you." "What are you talking about?" he shrieked. "VW Holdings is a shell company Vanessa uses to collect payments from multiple men she's running the same con on," I explained. "I filed for divorce yesterday and included civil fraud charges against her. The IRS received copies of all documentation this morning." The silence on the other end was profound. "You did what?" he whispered. "Katherine, you can't. She'll destroy me. Her family has connections everywhere." "Your career?" I asked, an edge in my voice. "You threw car keys at my chest, drained our children's college fund, and forged my signature on mortgage documents. And you're worried about your career." Before he could respond, another call came in. It was Margaret Ashford, the woman from the gala. "Edward, I have another call," I said and disconnected. "Katherine, this is Margaret Ashford," she said, her voice careful. "I'm calling because my husband Thomas just informed me that Meridian Imports terminated Edward's employment this morning. Apparently someone sent the dealership ownership detailed documentation of his relationship with a client, including evidence he was providing her with confidential customer information." "I hadn't sent that information. Someone else had. There's something else," Margaret continued. "Vanessa Whitmore contacted my husband this morning in a complete panic. The IRS documentation you filed triggered an audit not just of VW Holdings, but of Whitmore Development Corporation's entire financial structure. Her father is furious and has cut off her access to family funds. She's asking Thomas if he knows any way to make the lawsuit go away. She's offering to return some of the money. After Margaret hung up, I felt a flicker of vindication. Wednesday evening, Edward appeared at our home. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 4 days. "Katherine, please," he begged. "We need to talk reasonably. This is vindictive. Think about the children." "I am thinking about the children," I said, letting him into the entryway, but not inviting him to sit. "I'm thinking about how you liquidated their college fund and put our home at risk. Everything I'm doing now is protecting them from your choices." I laid Andrea's folder on the dining room table. "James Morrison from your finance department," I said, pointing to one set of documents. "Kevin Chong from Fleet Sales, Robert Sullivan, who retired last year. All of them made payments to VW Holdings. All of them had affairs with Vanessa. You weren't special, Edward. You were just the latest mark." He stared at the documents, his hands trembling. "She told me I was different." "She told you that because it was effective," I said. "You wanted access to her world so badly you bankrupted our family to pay for it." And for the first time I saw genuine recognition in his eyes. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now you move out. You cooperate with the divorce, and you hope the judge shows mercy when determining child support. Where am I supposed to go?" "I genuinely do not care, Edward." He left that evening with 2 suitcases. I told the children the truth. I sat Olivia and James at the kitchen table. "Your father and I are getting divorced. He made choices that broke the trust in our marriage." James cried. Olivia took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said, "for not pretending anymore." The 6 weeks until our court date were a blur. The story leaked to the local media, who dubbed it the luxury car love triangle fraud case. The divorce hearing was in late October. The courthouse was old, projecting stability. Judge Mary Ann Sheffield presided. David had briefed me 19 years on the bench, a former financial crimes prosecutor with zero tolerance for marital fraud. Edward sat with a young public defender who looked defeated before he began. He argued Edward was a victim of manipulation. Judge Sheffield listened impassively. Then David stood. He presented the fraudulent mortgage, the depleted savings, the payments to VW Holdings. He presented testimony from other wives whose husbands had been targeted by Vanessa. "Your Honor," David concluded, "Mr. Brennan didn't simply commit infidelity. He systematically defrauded his own family. He threw car keys at his wife's chest and told her to find her own way home." Judge Sheffield removed her reading glasses and fixed Edward with a stare that could freeze water. "Mr. Brennan," she began, "I have been on this bench for 19 years. I have rarely encountered such comprehensive and deliberate financial betrayal. You did not simply have an affair. You destroyed your family's financial security to fund it. You forged your wife's signature on mortgage documents, which constitutes potential criminal fraud. You liquidated your children's education funds." She put her glasses back on. "The court awards Mrs. Katherine Brennan full ownership of the marital home. All remaining marital assets are awarded to Mrs. Brennan. Mr. Brennan will be responsible for repaying the fraudulent second mortgage in full. Child support is set at 30% of Mr. Brennan's gross monthly income. Mrs. Brennan is awarded full legal custody of both minor children, with Mr. Brennan receiving supervised visitation rights. This court is adjourned." We walked out into the October sunshine. My parents were waiting with Olivia and James, who ran to me the moment they saw me. "Is it over?" Olivia asked. "It's over," I said, "and we're going to be okay." "I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore," James said. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. A woman named Linda Foster, referred by Margaret Ashford, described a husband with suspicious finances. Her world had just collapsed, and she needed help. I spent 3 days analyzing her records and found her husband had been funding a secret gambling addiction, forging her signature on loan applications. She filed for divorce the next week. She wasn't the only one. Within a month, 3 other women called. My practice was evolving. The civil case against Vanessa Whitmore settled. She repaid $220,000, covering all transferred funds damages and legal fees. The IRS assessed her for $340,000 in back taxes and penalties. Federal prosecutors filed wire fraud charges, and she accepted a plea agreement involving restitution and probation. Her family cut her off, and she moved to California. Edward found work selling mid-range cars, his income a fraction of what it once was. He lived in a studio apartment struggling to make child support payments. 1 year after he threw those keys at me, I walked into a dealership and bought a new car with money from my own expanded consulting practice. It was a practical, reliable SUV. As I drove it home, Olivia in the passenger seat scrolling through college brochures and James in the back working on math homework, I thought about his command, "Find your own way home." He had meant it as a dismissal, but I had found my way home not to the marriage I was trying to preserve, but forward to something I had built myself. The car keys Edward had thrown at me are now in my office, mounted in a small frame beneath a plaque that reads, "Sometimes the worst moments become catalysts for the best decisions." I now tell clients that the moment someone treats you as disposable is the moment you begin documenting everything. In trying to dispose of me, Edward had inadvertently created a professional practice dedicated to helping women refuse to be disposed of. A legacy of accountability. I had found my own way home, and in doing so, I had built something that would help countless others find theirs. If this story of financial justice and reclaimed dignity had you hooked, hit that like button now. My favorite part was when Katherine discovered the forged mortgage signature and realized Edward had committed actual fraud. What was your favorite moment? Drop your favorite scene in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of people who refuse to accept betrayal quietly. Subscribe and hit that notification bell.